In this video, we're going to take a look at how we actually test our models. So we'll set up a test model here, take a look at it. Let's jump over into our text editor and look inside some files here. First off, our actual test file is going to be critic_test.rb, and it's located inside your test folder, inside of the unit folder. So remember that we're looking at, right down here, we're looking at units being your model. And the specific file that we're looking at right here is our critic_test file. So inside this file, which was set up for us when we generated this model, we have some statements. We talked about those in the prior video. The main one that we first have to look at here is our fixtures method call, which calls up this fixture file, which is critics, and that relates directly here. So critics here is this critics fixture file right here, and I already have this file set up with some test data in here. Now these fields have to directly match your database field, so let's go over to our database here and take a quick look. So you'll see that here's our structure. We have an ID field, last name, first name, email address, and password. So these need to match up, and I have two entries into this test table. So what happens when this test gets instantiated, when you call it, the first thing it's going to do is grab that fixtures file and go ahead and enter those things into your test database. So in the prior video, we talked about what the test database was and having that set up, and we do have our test database in place with the proper security to get into it. Now the things that occur after that is where your tests are. Now the first test here, assert true, well, that's really not really much of a test. Assert is going to say whatever comes after this needs to be true. In this case, of course, it's going to be true. So we can say the first thing we want to see is if it's of the particular type that we're worried about. In other words, when we get a file out of there, is it going to be the way that we are of the type that we want? So by using the command kind of, we can say the type that we're going to worry about, since this is critic, and our object is going to be, let's make a critic, just to be clear what this is. Let's do some camel case then. Now, at this point, I don't have an acritic object, and this is going to fail, and you'll see that. Let's go ahead and run this. So to run it, we say Ruby, and then test, and since it's a unit test, and then we can say critic. And we'll go ahead and it's running all those things, sets it up, and it fails. Expected, critic was expected to be kind of critic, but was nil class. Well, that's because there's no object here. So first we have to set it up. So let's go up here and do a setup method. Now the setup method gets called automatically. You don't need to call it. So let's go ahead and set up our instant variable equal to critic find 1. And if you remember, our critic, first one here, the first one had an ID of 1. So this should find that first critic. So let's go ahead and run that test now and see if that took care of that. So we should get 1 test, 1 assertion, 0 failures. Very good. Now let's do assert equal, and then we'll say a name here. In this case, let's do Jones, and our comma, and do a critic, and let's do last name. Over to our test, and came out, we're fine. Now let's change this to, and I'm going to leave this equals for the moment. Let's go ahead and run that. And it came back and it told us that that's a failure, that Smith was expected, but instead it found Jones. So there's a variety of assert commands that you can actually use to test what's coming out of your database, and actually you can test many other things, like what's going into your database is what you're expecting. These are some very simple tests to get going here, and you can define any number of tests, and inside those tests you can have any number of actual asserts, and there's a whole great big number of asserts that are available out there, and I'll include links in the working files of what to websites showing you these different tests.